In late 2021, Israel announced the completion of an iron wall along the border of the Gaza Strip, a state-of-the-art 40-mile fence constructed of 140,000 tons of iron and steel, 20 feet high, and a fully fortified barrier underground. Equipped with sensors, radar systems, and remote-controlled weaponry, the behemoth project took 3.5 years to complete and over $1 billion. And yet, on October 7th, hundreds of Hamas militants were able to easily breach the wall and the rest of Israel's stout defenses in a matter of minutes. The attack began at 6:30 in the morning with a launch of thousands of Hamas missiles. Soon after, drones disabled the wall's remote defense capabilities, and Hamas soldiers quickly overtook multiple checkpoints along the border. By 7:30, Hamas fighters began sweeping into multiple Israeli border towns, massacring and kidnapping hundreds of civilians. By the end of the attack, more Jews were killed than on any single day since the Holocaust. How could this have happened? How was such an impenetrable fortress so easily breached by a poorly trained and equipped group of militia fighters? What makes this failure even more perplexing is that there were clear warning signs of an impending attack that both the US and Israel were made aware of. On September 28th, the Biden administration received multiple streams of intelligence that Hamas was poised to escalate rocket attacks across the border. On October 5th, a wire from the CIA warned of an increasing possibility of violence by Hamas. Then on October 6th, just one day before the attack, US officials circulated reporting from Israel indicating unusual activity by Hamas and that an attack was imminent. According to reports, Cairo had also repeatedly warned Israel of something big planned in Gaza. US Foreign Affairs Committee head Michael McCaul confirmed that these warnings were given. According to the New York Times, shortly before the attack, Israeli intelligence detected a surge of activity in Gazan military channels. Agents sent an alert to soldiers guarding the border, but the warning was inexplicably never acted upon. Additionally, it has been reported that Israeli civilians waited anywhere from 8 to 26 hours to finally be rescued by the Israeli military, which is curious since Israel is the size of New Jersey. Given this, some have speculated that the attack could not have been successful unless it was deliberately allowed by someone within the Israeli government. Is this just a crazy conspiracy theory? Why would a government allow the brutal massacre of its own citizens? To understand how such a seemingly incomprehensible action might be plausible, it's important to understand the history of this conflict and the current state of Israeli politics. Our story begins in 1948, when the land now known as Israel was controlled by Great Britain and populated primarily by Jews and Arabs. Due to increasing conflict between these people, Britain worked with the UN to split the land into two states. Although the Jews accepted this plan, the Arabs didn't, resulting in a number of brutal wars over the years. As a result of these conflicts, today, the land is split into three distinct territories. The State of Israel, governed by the Jewish people. The West Bank, which is jointly controlled by Jews and Palestinians under the Palestinian Authority. And the Gaza Strip, which is controlled by Palestinians under Hamas. This relationship has proven to be untenable. Although many Jews and Palestinians have sought to peacefully cohabitate, there are extremist Islamic factions that demand the complete obliteration of Israel. As a result, multiple wars and countless skirmishes within these borders have been waged over the years, causing thousands of deaths and creating a constant state of tension and anxiety. Unsurprisingly, this has also pushed some Jews to adopt a more aggressive position, including a man called Bezalel Smotrich. So who is Bezalel Smotrich? He is one of the most powerful politicians in Israel, currently serving as Minister of Finance, as well as a Defense Department Minister. In 2017, Smotrich published an article entitled Israel's Decisive Plan, in which he outlined his comprehensive vision to restore the Jewish state from river to the sea. This plan involves two steps to be implemented over the course of a number of years. The first step is called Victory Through Settlement, which involves the aggressive establishment of Israeli cities and towns within the West Bank, which, according to most of the international community, is illegal. The stated goal is to deflate the illusions of the Palestinian state and demonstrate the impossibility of establishing an Arab state west of Jordan. Smotrich notes that this is likely to cause terror efforts to only increase, and in fact, one of the reasons cited by Hamas for their attack was the expansion of Jewish settlements. Smotrich's plan for addressing this sort of Palestinian resistance is set forth in the second prong of his paper. In this stage, Palestinians would be given three options. The first option would be to remain in Israel under Jewish sovereignty, where Palestinians would have local voting rights but not full citizenship. The second option would be assisted emigration to surrounding Arab states, Europe, South America, or elsewhere. And the third option, for those that choose to continue armed struggle, is eradication. Over the last 5 years, Smotrich's ambitions appear to have been moving along according to plan, with the Jewish settler population growing by nearly 16% over the past 5 years. However, there have been two primary impediments to fully realize this vision. The first is the Israeli Supreme Court, which has struck down Israeli efforts to establish settlements on privately owned Palestinian land. But in July of this year, the Israeli legislature passed the first of a number of planned laws to significantly curb the Supreme Court's power, including by limiting the court's ability to overturn laws based on the concept of reasonableness, giving the legislature the power to override decisions of the court, and granting the Israeli government total control over judicial appointments. Over the last several months, hundreds of thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets in protest of these changes, claiming that the judicial overhaul would concentrate too much power in the hands of the majority. And Smotrich has been a key player in pushing for these reforms. In March of 2019, Smotrich wrote on his Facebook page, "With God's help, in our next term of office, we will pass, among other things, the override clause, and we will annul the reasonableness clause. We will restore the limitations on standing, and we will remove left-wing organizations from the courts." 3 weeks later, he added, "Take note, this is the last time that the High Court of Justice will decide for us." The second potential roadblock to the Decisive Plan relates to ongoing diplomatic talks among Saudi Arabia, the US, and Israel that began earlier this year. In March, Saudi Arabia reached out to the US to normalize relations with Israel. However, according to Saudi Foreign Minister, finding a pathway to peace for the Palestinian people would be central to any such normalization. And some have proposed that this would require halting Smotrich's ambitions in the West Bank and relinquishing significant portions of land to the Palestinians. According to the Decisive Plan, Smotrich views these sorts of attempts by the international community to fashion solutions in the form of international guarantees, aid packages, defense systems, and the like useless. From Smotrich's perspective, Israelis cannot allow ourselves to act according to the demands of the world, but rather act upon what is good and right for us, as any other nation in the world does. And what is good and right for us is to end this conflict decisively once and for all in our favor, and bring quiet, peace, prosperity, and security to the state of Israel. In the aftermath of the tragic events on October 7th, and the subsequent Israeli offensive into Gaza, there have been 3 decisive secondary consequences that have dealt serious blows to the roadblocks to the realization of the Decisive Plan. First is that all protests over judicial reform have ceased. The second is that the Israeli-Saudi normalization talks have been called off. The third is that following a media barrage of videos and images graphically depicting the Hamas atrocities, most governments around the world are now in full support of Israel's cause. And the support of the international community is a crucial component of Smotrich's plan. Smotrich notes that one of the biggest challenges to implementation of the Decisive Plan is acceptance by the international community, which historically had almost unanimously pushed for the two-state solution. Smotrich writes that Israel will need to strengthen the growing view concerning the unrealistic nature of the two-state solution which only leads to waves of terror and violence. He goes on to state that Israel will need to explain to the world that ending the conflict and removing the Arab hope of establishing a state west of the Jordan is the only way to ensure the existence and prosperity of the state of Israel. Now, to some, the notion that a government would sacrifice its own people to achieve its nationalistic ambitions may seem unfathomable. But recall that Smotrich explicitly recognized that his plan of aggressive settler expansion would result in more terror attacks, and that these terror attacks were a key component in convincing the world that the two-state solution was untenable. It's also important to note that Israel itself funded the creation of Hamas. This was done in an effort to divide Palestinian power between West Bank and Gaza factions, but even after Hamas and Israel engaged in multiple wars resulting in many Jewish casualties, Israel continued to seek financing for the terrorist regime. It's also important to remember that countless people throughout history have committed incomprehensible acts in the name of deeply held religious convictions. And from Smotrich's perspective, restoring the full Jewish state is not a question of political compromise. It is one of religious justice, ordained by God. In May of this year, Smotrich stated that the time would eventually come where there would be no choice but to reconquer Gaza. And to Smotrich, the crusade to retake Gaza is personal. During Israel's pullout from Gaza in 2005, Smotrich was arrested on suspicion of engaging in destructive acts to prevent the withdrawal. So given all this, is the notion that the Israeli government could have allowed the attack to occur really such a crazy conspiracy theory? Consider this region's history from the Israeli point of view. Your people have faced brutal persecution going back to ancient times. You have suffered through countless, seemingly unending wars with your neighbors. You live on a land intertwined with the enemy, whose holy mission is to wipe you off the face of the planet. In many ways, from the Jewish perspective, the Decisive Plan is the only rational path to lasting peace. So the next question is, how do you actually achieve this? The Palestinian people will not leave on their own volition, and Israel cannot unilaterally force them out unprovoked without completely destroying its standing in the international community. Realistically, the only way to fully realize the plan is for there to be a historical, earth-shattering event that breaks the current paradigm and justifies a previously unthinkable, devastating response.